Mr. McIntyre?
I'd like to make a motion to amend Section 000 of Local Board Procedures, number 004. I would like to amend that, I think it's worded a little bit vaguely, and I think this would prevent possible conflict of interest on the board in the future.
What policy regarding
Can you read it to us, please?
Well, I don't have the actual, do you have the original wording of it? Okay. The original wording, I believe, was, except as provided by law, she, he, meaning school board member, shall not be engaged in a business transaction with the school district, be employed by the school district, or receive pay for services from the school district. I would like to amend this to add all of the aforementioned and add, or work on site for the school district for any subcontractor for the district. In other words, if you're on this board, you cannot work and be paid in the district. I think it's an immediate conflict of interest because everything we vote on here, even if we just voted on the budget, which includes money that would be going into your pockets. So I think that's an immediate conflict of interest, and I would just like to see this clarified under our current policy to avoid any future conflicts.
So let me give you an concrete example of that. I was a volunteer, that's an unpaid position, for the track team this year, and I happened to serve a couple times in the booth, that is collecting statistics and pounding the data into the computers. So the people that do that get money for doing it, like $40 for that service. It's like a referee. You could pay a referee for their service during an athletic event. Well, these volunteers do get some money. So I waived it because I performed the service, but I didn't feel comfortable. I thought it would be a conflict of interest receiving money for having served as a volunteer because I'm on the school board.
You can serve as a volunteer, but you can't get paid currently
getting paid, you're
by
no
the
longer
district at
volunteer.
all. That's already against board policy. No school board member can be paid by the district in any way.
This just expands it to things like Kelly Services.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If you're going to work for Kelly Services, you can work in any school district other than Gateway.
So I am happy adding that provision because that would have reduced the lack of clarity that I had. In other words, I had to be alert to not receive that money and refuse it from the coach, because otherwise it had just shown up in my
Right.
mailbox. I didn't want it to show up in my mailbox. So this would clear that up a little bit. Thank you.
Can I bring something up real quick? This came up because I was talking to Mrs. Crump a couple weeks ago and said how much I missed working with the students. And Mrs. Crump says, well, you can work, me personally, because I did work for the district over 20 years before getting on the school board. She says, I could very well employ myself, go through Kelly Services and be employed as a third party. So I went through all the process and everything, and we were out after our last meeting. It came up, and then all of a sudden, it's a big thing. Now, Mrs. Crump, am I correct in you saying I was able to go through Kelly Services?
Any member of the community can go apply to Kelly Services. The district cannot block anyone from being an employee of Kelly Services.
You also said that I was eligible to work for Gateway if necessary, if temporary or, they needed substitute, paraprofessional, secretary, whatever. Am I correct in saying that?
There is nothing in place that would prohibit that at this time.
Mr. Dice then said that he would look into it, not at my suggestion or anything. He took that upon himself last week and came back with Mr. Dice, if you would like to.
I rendered an opinion to Val that indicated that, it said several things, but there is a case out there that talks about a member of school board working for an AIU, and that school board that he was a member of also employed the AIU. The court said that was okay, that was not incompatible. I suggested some other things in the memo to her about how to deal with this. There is no case law that gets any closer that I could find. She could work for Kelly Services, and under that case, it appears she may well be able to work for the district. That, I told her, however, that that could also be challenged, and I'm not sure that the courts would take up that same type of thinking if a challenge was made if she worked at Gateway. Nothing stops her from working for Kelly Services in other jurisdictions, other school districts, and certainly that would not be a conflict. I hear Mr. McIntyre saying that he wants to change the language in a policy. Am I right, Rick?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. And just so we all know, that's one of those 7-day rule things that we have to, of course, if you have 6 votes, that overrules that
Correct.
7-day, or the 7-day notice. What I'm hearing you say is that you don't want school board members to be able to work for contractors that contract with the district under any circumstance.
No, they can, as a board member, you can work for Kelly Services.
Right, but you can't work
yeah,
at Gateway.
Mrs. Crump, do you know of any other examples of Kelly Services in particular that that they employ school board members in any other districts?
I reached out to them. They have only had one other instance when a school board member applied to Kelly Services, but they had abstained themselves from working in their current district.
That was Woodland Hills, correct?
Yes, it
And the
is.
board member cited a conflict of interest as a reason for
Yes.
working for Kelly Services, but making it clear that they would not be able to work within the district that they serve.
Yes.
Rick, may I ask you, is it reason for me, or do you feel that I would want to continue to keep Kelly Services, or is there another reason? My reason for wanting to work back in the district is I didn't want to leave in the beginning. I miss working with these kids. You have no idea what it's like. I'm not doing it for
That's
the
an
money.
assumption. I do know what it's like.
Okay, that's an assumption. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because it's a big void. I still have my job that I'm working for, but this would be in addition to it.
Well, can I make a recommendation?
You may do whatever.
Can you serve as a volunteer?
I do volunteer for the
I
district
know.
right now.
I mean, I think if you volunteer in roughly the same capacity, I think it eliminates all conflict of interest.
I don't.
Okay, well,
Well, because the spirit of the policy and the law, just from what you have here, the policy says, just so everybody can get up to speed with us, except as provided by law, board members shall not be engaged in a business transaction with the school district, be employed by the school district, or receive pay for services from the school district. And then section 324
state code.
of the state code says no school director during the term for which he was elected or appointed be employed in any capacity by the school district in which he is elected or appointed, or receive any pay for services rendered to the district except for exceptions that they give in the act. I think that you have to look at the spirit of that law. Is this a conflict of interest? I have no problem if Val works for Kelly Services. The question is whether she works in the Gateway School District, and she's working with teachers, faculty, and principals, of whom she also is determining salaries, layoffs, votes, budgets. It's a huge conflict of interest, Val.
can
I'm sorry that
abstain.
you missed the kids, but I definitely think, if you look at the spirit of the law, tell me why is it that you think that board members are not supposed to be employed by the district? What, in your opinion, why do you think that,
Can we-
why is that in there? Why shouldn't a board member be employed by the district?
I'm not saying I'm not being employed by the district. You're saying I'm being employed
I'm
by
saying-
Kelly Services if it goes through.
Yeah, but it's you're working on site, it's just who's paying your
Mary Beth,
paycheck.
when you go into work, I don't sit there and talk to teachers or to principals or to the educators about salaries or what it is. I work with the children. I mean, that's my job.
But
when
you're
I
not
go in.
building relationships with other staff members who you, essence,
try
are
not to.
overseeing their
I try
contracts.
not to,
And
yeah.
you're gonna have to abstain then from any
That's fine
vote
with me.
that has to do with Kelly Services, that has
That's
to do
fine.
with special ed, that has to do with
That's fine, Mary
clerical,
Beth.
that has to do.
That means
Well,
you
that
can't-
makes
that
you a
means you can't vote on the
non-functioning
budget.
board member.
You're making something out of something that shouldn't be.
I disagree.
I
Disagree.
agree completely.
I agree. This all came up at an after, excuse me?
What were the numbers?
Sorry?
What were the policy numbers? I'd like to look it up.
It's under local board procedures, which is the first section, 000, number 004. Is
Mrs.
the
Crump.
current policy, but if we can go back to what Mary Beth said about objecting to the volunteer status, I'm not sure why that would be a conflict. As Mr. Ritter pointed out earlier, he volunteers with the track, the track team. I don't view that I think the spirit of the policy that we have, which I think just needs to be clarified, and definitely the spirit of the state code is that you cannot receive money that you are voting on allocating. You understand?
Yeah,
Like,
so you see it differently than I do. I see it as a conflict of her actually being on a board and then being coworkers with people that she's kind of overseeing it
Well, then,
as
I
a
mean,
conflict.
if that's the case, then Mr. Ritter's been in a conflict for quite some time.
But sports,
I don't
but
see it
sports
that
is
way.
extracurricular. We're talking
True.
about an everyday employment
understand.
with faculty.
But
Anybody else have any comments on
Let me
this?
just say it again. She's not, and again, I don't want to argue a position here because this is clearly something that everybody has their own personal opinion about. But recognize from a legal standpoint, she's working, she gets a paycheck, not from Gateway, but from Kelly Services. And she's not working for Gateway. However, clearly, if Rick's language is adopted, she would not be able to work for Kelly Services because you've included that direct or indirect situation. But in the literal sense, she is not working for Gateway School District. I know how it appears, and I said that into my memo to her, that there is that appearance, but from a legal standpoint, she could do it. With the change in the policy, she would not be able to do it.
What does the invoice look like, Mrs. Crump, when you pay Kelly Services? Does it name people specifically, or how many hours they work, or?
What you all see is just the total amount. The invoices that are presented, we break it down by account codes, and that's what the board sees.
Yeah.
It's just the total amount and the account code it's charged to. The individual bill that we do receive weekly is by week, by date. It lists the teacher or the employee's name and then the person who subs,
And
along with the amount that we
let me say
pay.
one more thing, just that there's a gentleman on Penn Hill School Board who is a member, he works for the AIU. It's the exact same situation as the case. And he is a school board member. Penn Hills uses the AIU. On every vote that's taken that has anything to do with the AIU, he abstains. And he does that every meeting, and he goes through it. And it's burdensome, but he's taken on that burden, so he does that.
All right, so first of all, Val, this is not a personal thing. This isn't, it's not. I know you're not going to believe that. It's just that this.
Well, why
this
can't you just
discussion-
work for
this-
Penn Trafford or Franklin or Plum?
Can I please? What all this did was just bring up, I think, a vague area in the wording of our policy. Because it's nothing against you. It really isn't. I just think that finding this loophole to get back into working in the district is, and I understand why you want to do it, but I think I just think it's an egregious conflict of interest. And you even agreed a minute ago that you would be then forced to abstain on voting on the budget. Am I right?
I didn't say budget.
Yeah, you did.
We were talking on the specific person that I would be employed by. Mary
Yes.
Beth kept saying teachers and contracts and everything. I'm not there to discuss that, is what I'm saying. The only thing that I would abstain from is what Mr. Dice had said would be anything to do with Kelly Services. That's,
Which is included in our budget.
that I would abstain from the
From
Kelly
voting
Services.
on our budget. And is that what you're saying? You understand that
You could single that.
the single
choose that
largest
single that.
responsibility we have as board members
I could single
is
that
the
one out.
budget.
I could single the Kelly Services out.
And this
And the budget.
board can also vote no not to hire her.
You can
No,
go
we
back to
can't.
Kelly Services and say you don't want her.
That's going beyond the spirit of what we're after here. We're after clear language.
Right, we're just after clarity.
Well,
And-
Mr. Dice, could you comment on what Trish said? She did say that the school board, if Val was employed by Kelly Services, her name would be on the invoice that the district is paying. Is that outside the bounds of no employee in any capacity
That's the phrase that
can
that
receive
I keep
funds?
hanging
Because
on,
if you
Mr.
have
Dice.
an invoice from Kelly Services to Gateway School District, and right there it has a school board member's name, how is that not violating?
Then let's ask Trish who she writes the check to.
Check is written to Kelly Services.
Okay, so there's the kicker. I mean, the problem is, the fact that you have a contractor that employs one of your school board members, there's not a direct conflict there. Now, if you adopt Rick's language, there can be an indirect conflict that would be prohibited. But without that language, I think that legally she's within her right to do that. Again, the AIU demonstrates names in their reports and bills, and we pay them. And I suggest to the individual in Penn Hills, you must abstain on that particular line item. I would be doing the same to Val.
So Kelly Services also provides clerical services, so if I want to be a secretary under Kelly Services at Ramsey Elementary, that would be okay?
If you wanted to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So all of us could apply for jobs at Kelly Services, and we could all work with all of you in the schools. That would be
And
great, right?
I'm not saying that it's a good thing, it just so happens that in the law, I don't think there's a direct conflict.
Can I interrupt 1 second? Just repeat that one more time. This whole debate's been semi-entertaining. Do the last legal part, please.
Okay, I'm saying to you, and I don't like to be redundant, and I'm starting to feel redundant about this. This is not a conflict under the law, unless you change the language.
If you think it's a conflict, you have to change the board policy.
That's why Rick has suggested. a board
I am
policy.
suggesting it, Bruce, and I respectfully disagree with your interpretation. I think the phrase "be employed
That's
in
why
any
that's-
capacity in the district," I think is really clear.
Okay. And I'm sure
And
that.
I'm not looking to get into a legalese
I'm
battle
sure
with you,
that
Bruce.
if you contacted the 4,000 attorneys in Allegheny County, you would hear varying disputes and disagreements about what
Right.
the interpretation is. I think I'm being reasonable, given what the case said and what's gone on.
I agree.
Again, you can correct it if you don't like the
And that's the
result.
point, that's the
Correct it.
point of this.
I understand that.
So there are a couple,
Just as another example, if I may, under the current wording of our policy, the board could vote to outsource the hiring of our head football coach to Kelly Services or another outfit similar to that. I could then apply for that job and become the head football coach at Gateway as a school board member.
it's true.
These are the kind of things that I think the language needs to be in place to avoid. Does that make sense?
It made sense a half an hour ago. I
Okay,
think
so are we
everyone
ready to vote? I mean,
understands the
it comes
debate.
down to, if you think it's a conflict of interest, then the wording should be changed. If you don't,
So that's the
So
motion,
be it.
correct? The motion is to change the wording,
correct.
correct? That's where we are right now?
Could we,
Have we heard
Is there a
the
second on that?
change in the wording?
I-
That's my question.
Bonnie?
I
Second.
could have heard it an hour ago.
So could-
I-
What's the wording in the change?
The wording in the change is to add to the end of the current policy, or work on site for the school district for any subcontractor for the district.
So she could still work for Kelly Services. She just could not
Correct.
work at Gateway
Not-
School District.
Yeah, not at Gateway.
In order to make that language change, that policy has to be placed on 30-day public display. So is
Correct.
that what we're doing today? Is that what we're trying to do?
We would need a motion to approve the language, then for it to go on 30-day display.
And then it will be voted on in 30 days.
Yes.
Okay. So,
So I would allow for public comment.
right.
Yes.
Okay, so we're voting on putting it on display.
So was there a second? Someone help me
Second.
out.
Yeah, Mary
Yeah,
Beth.
Mary Beth, yes, we have a second.
Roll call?
Mrs. Cerrucci,
Aye.
Mr. Gottman,
Aye.
Dr. Kalkstein,
Aye.
Mr. Lapsevich,
No.
Mr. McIntyre,
Aye.
Mr. Ritter,
aye.
Mrs. Warning, Mr. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bova.
No.
6-3.
Motion
Motion
carries.
carries.
For the record, you probably should have abstained from
I
that.
was going to say that. You probably should have
Any
voted on that
other
one.
resolutions by board members at this time?